The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters, so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. These words from Epictetus, a former slave who became one of history's most influential philosophers, capture the essence of Stoicism when everything feels beyond our grasp. In our society, where we're constantly told to control everything from careers to appearance to others' opinions, Stoicism offers a radically different approach, one that promises genuine flourishing even amid chaos. CEOs, athletes, and leaders throughout history have embraced these principles during their darkest moments. The modern mental health crisis. What if the solution to our modern anxiety epidemic was discovered over 2,000 years ago? It's a striking thought, but one worth considering as we find ourselves in what many experts now call a full-blown mental health crisis. Look around you. The average person today processes more information in a single day than someone in the 1800s would encounter in their entire lifetime. Your smartphone bombards you with notifications, emails, and news updates that trigger your brain's threat detection system hundreds of times daily. Social media algorithms manipulate your attention, pulling you between outrage and validation while reinforcing the message that you're not quite good enough. We're living in a psychological environment our brains were never designed to handle. The human mind evolved over thousands of years to deal with immediate physical threats and small tribal communities. Our ancestors worried about predators, food supplies, and maintaining harmony with perhaps 150 people they knew intimately. Their stress responses were designed for acute dangers. The momentary spike of adrenaline when facing a predator, followed by a return to baseline. Today, your brain responds to an angry email from your boss with the same physiological reaction as if facing a saber-toothed tiger. The key difference is that the email sits in your inbox, continuously triggering that stress response. Your social circle has expanded from 150 people to potentially millions through social media. Your primitive brain, designed to care deeply about your standing within a small tribe, now compares your worst moments to the carefully curated highlights of countless strangers. According to the World Health Organization, anxiety disorders affect nearly 300 million people globally, making them the most prevalent mental health conditions worldwide. In the United States alone, these disorders impact 40 million adults, nearly 20% of the population. These numbers were rising steadily even before the pandemic created what researchers call a second pandemic of mental health challenges. These issues cut across all demographic lines. Mental health challenges affect people across age groups, income levels, and cultural backgrounds. Young people have been especially hard hit, with anxiety disorders among teenagers and young adults nearly doubling in the past decade. Our conventional approaches to managing this crisis often fall short. Many turn to medication, which, while helpful and necessary for many, treats symptoms rather than addressing the root psychological patterns that generate suffering. Others try various forms of therapy, mindfulness, or self-help strategies that provide temporary relief, but don't fundamentally alter our relationship with chaos. The quick-fix solutions dominating popular culture, from positive thinking to wellness trends, often prove inadequate when life delivers serious challenges. I discovered this harsh truth 3 years ago. After building what looked like a successful career and achieving many external markers of success, I found myself paralyzed by anxiety and existential dread. My usual coping mechanisms, exercise, meditation, therapy, even medication, couldn't touch the profound sense that I had no solid ground beneath me. The world seemed chaotic, unpredictable, and fundamentally hostile. The breaking point came during a routine presentation at work. Standing before my colleagues, I froze completely, unable to speak, sweating profusely, my mind blank with terror. I mumbled an excuse and fled, collapsing in a bathroom stall where I experienced a full-blown panic attack. In that moment, I realized something had to fundamentally change. My entire approach to navigating life's inherent chaos. My search led me through Eastern spiritual traditions and modern psychological approaches. But the framework that offered a complete paradigm shift came from an unexpected source: the ancient philosophy of Stoicism. This wasn't a historical curiosity, but a practical, tested system for maintaining inner stability regardless of external circumstances. Stoicism emerged during another period of extreme uncertainty and upheaval. As Greek city-states declined and the Roman Empire expanded, people experienced profound political instability economic uncertainty, and the collapse of traditional social structures. In response, the Stoics developed a philosophical system specifically designed to navigate unpredictable times with mental clarity and emotional resilience. The Stoics understood something critical that modern psychology has recently validated. Events themselves don't cause our suffering. Our judgments about those events do. As Epictetus, a former slave who became one of Stoicism's greatest teachers, wrote, "Men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." This insight forms the foundation of today's most effective therapeutic approaches, including cognitive behavioral therapy. The Stoics created a comprehensive system for living well in an unpredictable world. They offered practical exercises for developing mental resilience, managing emotions, and maintaining perspective amid chaos. Their approach wasn't about suppressing emotions or enduring hardship with a stiff upper lip. Rather, they offered a nuanced understanding of how to process emotions effectively while maintaining inner freedom regardless of external circumstances. What makes Stoicism particularly valuable today is its practicality. Unlike philosophical traditions focused on abstract theorizing, Stoicism was meant to be applied in daily life. Its teachers included people from all walks of life, from Epictetus the former slave to Seneca the statesman to Marcus Aurelius the emperor, who developed these principles while facing real-world challenges. The Stoic approach offers something our fragmented modern wellness culture lacks: a coherent framework addressing every aspect of human experience. Rather than applying separate techniques for anxiety, decision-making, and relationships, Stoicism provides core principles that apply universally. This makes it both simpler to learn and more powerful than approaches that treat human struggles as isolated problems requiring specialized solutions. Stoicism doesn't ask you to adopt supernatural beliefs or retreat from ordinary life. It doesn't demand hours of meditation or expensive retreats. It requires only the willingness to examine your own mind and practice a few core mental disciplines, making it perfectly suited for busy modern lives and accessible to anyone regardless of background, beliefs, or circumstances. Stoicism demystified what it really is and isn't. Despite its accessibility, when most people hear Stoicism, they imagine emotionless robots enduring life's hardships with clenched jaws and suppressed tears. This widespread misunderstanding isn't just a casual oversight. It's a fundamental misreading that robs this ancient philosophy of its true power and relevance. The American Psychological Association has even linked this misinterpretation to harmful notions of traditional masculinity, where showing vulnerability or discussing emotions is seen as weakness. But what if everything you thought you knew about this ancient philosophy was fundamentally wrong? The truth is, Stoicism never advocated for emotional suppression. The ancient Stoics were deeply concerned with understanding our emotional lives, not eliminating them. They offered sophisticated techniques for processing emotions through reason and understanding. This distinction completely transforms how we might apply this philosophy to our modern challenges. When we examine what the Stoics actually wrote about emotions, we find something far more nuanced than popular stereotypes suggest. They understood that emotions are experiences to be navigated with wisdom. The Stoics recognized a profound truth that modern psychology has only recently validated. Our emotions stem not from events themselves, but from our judgments about those events. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, external things are not the problem. It's your assessment of them, which you can erase right now. This insight, that our interpretations create our emotional reality, forms the cornerstone of Stoic emotional processing. By changing how we perceive situations, we can transform our emotional responses. This principle underpins cognitive behavioral therapy, one of today's most effective psychological approaches for treating anxiety and depression. Consider how a CBT therapist might help a patient who experiences paralyzing anxiety before public speaking. They would examine the thoughts creating the anxiety. Everyone will judge me harshly, test their validity, and develop more balanced perspectives. This modern therapeutic technique directly mirrors the Stoic practice of examining judgments about events rather than being controlled by initial reactions. Stoicism emerged in the early 3rd century BC during periods of extreme societal and political instability. In a world where certainty was scarce and chaos common, the Stoics created a practical framework for navigating life's inevitable challenges. There, philosophy wasn't born in peaceful ivory towers, but in the messy reality of uncertain times that mirror our own. The personal stories of Stoicism's key figures reveal how they applied these principles to relatable human struggles. Marcus Aurelius practiced Stoicism daily while leading an empire during a devastating plague, wrestling with immense responsibilities and documenting his struggles in Meditations. Never intended for publication, but as a private journal of his efforts to live virtuously. Epictetus presents an even more striking example. Beginning life as a slave, he eventually became one of Stoicism's most analytical thinkers. His teachings in the Enchiridion were practical strategies for improving quality of life developed through personal hardship. Having experienced extreme lack of control over his external circumstances, he focused intensely on cultivating inner freedom, the one domain where even a slave could exercise choice. Then there's Seneca, a wealthy statesman who experienced dramatic reversals of fortune, including exile. Despite being one of the richest men of his time, he deliberately practiced voluntary discomfort, living on meager meals, wearing rough clothing, and swimming in cold water, not as punishment, but as preparation. Seneca believed that by temporarily experiencing the lifestyle of the less fortunate, he could develop greater empathy and fortify himself against potential future losses. His Letters from a Stoic offer practical considerations on friendship, mortality, and using time wisely. What makes these historical figures compelling is their humanity. They struggled, made mistakes, and sometimes failed to live up to their own ideals, yet continued striving. Their writings present Stoicism as a practical approach to being better humans amid life's uncertainties. Rather than emotional suppression, Stoicism teaches strategic emotional processing, acknowledging emotions fully while using reason to understand their sources and respond wisely. This approach develops the capacity to experience feelings without being controlled by them. The goal is gaining emotional intelligence and resilience. Think of it as developing an inner observer, a part of yourself that can notice anger, fear, or desire arising without immediately acting on these impulses. This creates a crucial space between stimulus and response, allowing for choices that align with your deeper values rather than momentary emotions. Far from making you robotic, this practice deepens your capacity to engage authentically with your emotional life. This misunderstanding matters because it prevents people from accessing a valuable philosophy. True Stoicism offers tools for processing experiences in ways that honor your humanity while preventing emotional overwhelm. Someone practicing the actual Stoic approach would acknowledge their emotion, examine the judgments creating it, and respond with wisdom rather than reactivity. Modern psychology confirms that the Stoic approach of emotional acceptance, coupled with rational examination, aligns with evidence-based practices like mindfulness and cognitive therapy, which have demonstrated significant benefits for mental health. What makes Stoicism particularly valuable today is its practicality. It doesn't require retreating from ordinary life or adopting supernatural beliefs. It demands only the willingness to examine your own mind and practice responding to life's challenges with wisdom. Its exercises can be integrated into daily routines, offering immediate benefits while building long-term resilience. The modern Stoic Renaissance. This practicality has sparked what might be called a Stoic Renaissance in our time, with an unlikely group leading the charge. What draws Silicon Valley executives, professional athletes, and military commanders to an ancient philosophy that predates smartphones by 2 millennia? The answer reveals something profound about our modern predicament, and why those navigating today's most high-pressure environments are secretly turning to wisdom that survived the fall of Rome. The last decade has witnessed a remarkable resurgence of Stoic philosophy. What was once confined to dusty academic corridors has exploded into mainstream consciousness. Bookstore shelves now prominently feature Stoic-themed titles. Online communities dedicated to discussing Stoic principles have flourished, and conferences centered around these ancient practices regularly sell out to capacity crowds. This represents a growing recognition that Stoicism offers practical tools for navigating our chaotic world. But why Stoicism specifically? Among countless ancient wisdom traditions, what explains its particular appeal to high performers and decision-makers? The answer lies in its unique combination of pragmatism and profundity. Unlike philosophies that require elaborate rituals or spiritual beliefs, Stoicism offers concrete practices that can be implemented immediately and tested in real-world conditions. It encourages engagement with ordinary life, but with greater intentionality. This practicality holds special appeal for those operating in environments where clear thinking amid chaos is essential. Tech executives face unprecedented complexity in guiding organizations through disruptive innovation cycles. Military leaders must maintain composure while making life or death decisions. Professional athletes need mental frameworks to manage extreme pressure during critical moments. For all these groups, Stoicism provides a battle-tested operating system for the mind. Consider Twitter co-founder Jack Dorsey, who has incorporated Stoic practices into his daily routine. He takes ice baths and walks 5 miles to work each day as deliberate applications of voluntary discomfort, a core Stoic practice. By intentionally exposing himself to mild discomfort, Dorsey builds resilience that helps him navigate the intense pressures of running a global tech platform. His practices are calculated applications of philosophical principles with ancient roots. What makes Stoicism particularly valuable in today's landscape is how it directly addresses the distinct psychological challenges of modern life. We live in an era where technology serves as both tool and tormentor, creating unprecedented information overload, constant distraction, and fragmented attention. The Stoic practice of directing attention intentionally, focusing on what matters while releasing what doesn't, offers a practical antidote to digital overwhelm. When everything demands your attention, Stoicism teaches you to be selective about where you invest your mental energy. The philosophy also counteracts the modern plague of constant comparison. Social media platforms create endless opportunities for measuring ourselves against curated versions of others, triggering feelings of inadequacy and anxiety. Stoicism's emphasis on internal metrics of success, judging yourself by your own actions rather than external outcomes, provides a psychological refuge from the comparison trap. When a military commander applies this principle, they focus on executing their mission with excellence rather than worrying about perceptions or outcomes beyond their control. Perhaps most crucially, Stoicism offers a framework for navigating pervasive uncertainty. We live in an era where traditional career paths have dissolved, economic systems feel increasingly unstable, and even basic aspects of daily life can change overnight, as the pandemic vividly demonstrated. The Stoic approach of focusing exclusively on what you can control while accepting what you cannot creates mental clarity in situations where the future remains fundamentally unpredictable. This explains why so many leaders in volatile industries turn to these ancient practices. The work of contemporary Stoic popularizers has been instrumental in translating these ancient principles for modern application. Ryan Holiday's The Daily Stoic has sold over 1 million copies worldwide and been translated into 40 languages, with Holiday amassing more than 3 million Instagram followers eager for accessible Stoic wisdom. This reach demonstrates how hungry people are for practical philosophical frameworks they can apply to everyday challenges. The modern Stoic Renaissance isn't without criticism. Some argue that popular interpretations of Stoicism sometimes oversimplify its nuances or reinforce harmful notions about emotional suppression. Critics point to misapplications that seem to endorse bottling up feelings rather than processing them wisely. But proponents counter that authentic Stoicism is about emotional intelligence, teaching practitioners to understand their emotions without being ruled by them, developing the capacity to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. What's fascinating about Stoicism's revival is how it's been adapted for contemporary contexts while maintaining its core principles. Tech companies now offer employees workshops on applying Stoic principles to workplace challenges. Professional sports teams incorporate Stoic practices into their mental training regimens. Military units draw on Stoic teachings to build psychological resilience in their personnel. In each case, the philosophy is translated into language and practices relevant to the specific context, demonstrating its remarkable adaptability. At its heart, what Stoicism offers high performers is a practical framework for decision-making in complex environments. When faced with overwhelming options and limited information, the Stoic approach cuts through the noise by asking simple but profound questions. What is within my control here? What virtues should guide my actions in this situation? What would the wisest version of myself do? These questions create mental clarity precisely when it's most elusive, during high-pressure moments when emotions might otherwise cloud judgment. This is why leaders increasingly turn to Stoicism. It provides the mental clarity and emotional stability needed to navigate unprecedented complexity. The philosophy doesn't promise success in external outcomes, which are ultimately beyond our control. Instead, it offers something more valuable: the ability to maintain internal coherence and purpose regardless of external circumstances. For those tasked with making consequential decisions amid chaos, this philosophical framework proves invaluable. The dichotomy of control, the core Stoic principle. The remarkable resilience of Stoics doesn't stem from superhuman emotional strength or elaborate meditation techniques. Instead, it flows from a fundamental mental shift about what truly deserves our attention and energy. When Epictetus wrote that some things are within our power, while others are not, he wasn't merely stating a philosophical position. He was revealing the key that unlocks freedom from the majority of human suffering. At the heart of Stoicism lies the transformative concept known as the dichotomy of control, a mental framework that functions like a filter, sifting what deserves our attention from what doesn't. This filter asks us to distinguish in every situation: what aspects can I influence, and what aspects are beyond my reach? This differentiation creates an entirely new relationship with our challenges. Consider what's causing you stress right now: a work deadline, relationship tension, health concerns. The dichotomy of control reveals that our suffering intensifies when we exhaust ourselves trying to control elements beyond our influence. We struggle because we apply our limited resources to the wrong targets. Epictetus formulated this principle with clarity. We have complete control over our internal responses, our opinions, motivations, desires, and aversions. Conversely, our physical bodies, possessions, reputation, and external circumstances lie partially or completely outside our direct influence. When consistently applied, this insight transforms how we approach common situations. Through this lens, a stressful job interview becomes manageable. You recognize you cannot control the interviewer's questions or their ultimate decision, but you can control your preparation and how you present yourself. Similarly, with interpersonal conflicts, while you can't control another's rude behavior, you maintain authority over your reaction. The principle proves valuable with workplace challenges too. Rather than fixating on changing others, largely impossible, you direct attention to managing your own responses and maintaining your standards. This principle revolutionizes our emotional landscape. As Epictetus observed, people are disturbed not by events, but by their judgments about events. This insight, articulated nearly 2,000 years ago, forms the foundation of modern cognitive behavioral therapy. The connection is deliberate. Psychologist Albert Ellis, who developed rational emotive behavior therapy, explicitly credited Stoic philosophy as a major influence on his work. To apply the dichotomy of control effectively, use this structured four-step process. 1. Identify the situation causing distress. Write it down using observable facts without judgment or emotional language. Example: instead of "my boss hates me," note, "my boss provided critical feedback," and assign the lead role to my colleague. 2. Create 2 columns, within my control and outside my control, and sort all elements of the situation. Be ruthlessly honest about what you can actually influence. 3. Release attachment to everything in the outside my control column. This isn't about indifference, but acknowledging reality. Visualize physically placing these concerns in a container and setting it aside. 4. Develop a focused action plan addressing only the elements within your control, transforming anxious rumination into purposeful action. Modern research validates this approach's effectiveness. During Stoic Week 2022, controlling the controllables showed an extremely high correlation with flourishing, 0.51, while letting go of things I cannot control, significantly associated with better emotional balance, 0.47. The data confirms what Stoics have known for centuries. This mental distinction directly connects to life satisfaction and resilience. What typically falls outside our control? The past cannot be changed. Other people's actions and opinions remain firmly in their domain. Our automatic physiological responses, like the adrenaline rush when startled, happen too quickly for conscious intervention. Even our initial negative thoughts often arise automatically. Conversely, while we can't prevent the initial fight or flight response, we can influence how we respond to it. We determine whether to believe and act on automatic negative thoughts. Our present actions and future choices remain within our domain of influence. By consistently returning attention to these areas, we build what might be called the let it go psychological muscle, the ability to recognize and release what we cannot change. The dichotomy of control effectively addresses common mental health challenges like worry, anxiety, depression, and anger. These states often stem from judgments about events rather than the events themselves. By targeting these interpretations we assign to neutral occurrences, we gain remarkable power over our emotional responses. When consistently applied, something remarkable happens. Mental energy previously consumed by fruitless attempts to control the uncontrollable becomes available for creative problem-solving and meaningful action. The emotional space created allows for greater presence with what's actually happening. We become more effective precisely because we've stopped trying to control impossible tasks. Consider your current challenges. That important presentation? You can't control whether your ideas will be accepted, but you can ensure they're well-researched and clearly communicated. A difficult relationship? You can't control your partner's feelings, but you can communicate honestly. A health concern? You can't guarantee outcomes, but you can make informed choices about treatment. In each case, the dichotomy of control doesn't dismiss concerns. It redirects attention to where it can actually make a difference. The 4 cardinal virtues, your decision-making framework. Having identified what's in your control, a deeper question emerges. How do you decide what actions to take with that power? The Stoics didn't leave us with half the equation. They developed a sophisticated framework for excellence that's been hiding in plain sight for 2 millennia. One that makes modern decision-making systems seem unnecessarily complicated by comparison. This framework isn't a list of rigid rules, but a set of interconnected virtues that form a compass for navigating life's complexities. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lie the 4 cardinal virtues: wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. These form a cohesive system that reinforces moral excellence, or what the Greeks called arete. The Stoics saw these virtues as the path to the highest good and a truly serene existence. Unlike the overwhelming barrage of contradictory advice we encounter today, from productivity hacks to relationship guidelines to ethical frameworks, the 4 virtues offer a remarkably clear structure for making decisions in virtually any situation. The beauty of this system lies in its simplicity and comprehensiveness. When facing a difficult choice, you don't need to consult multiple frameworks or get lost in complex decision trees. Instead, you can examine the situation through the lens of these 4 virtues, which together create a reliable compass for navigating life's challenges. Let's begin with wisdom, which the Stoics considered the foundational virtue. This is practical wisdom, the ability to distinguish between what is good, evil, and indifferent. Wisdom involves understanding what to choose, what to avoid, and what doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. It's about recognizing the space between stimulus and response, that crucial moment where your power of choice resides. As Viktor Frankl put it, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Epictetus captured this perfectly. The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters, so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control. In practice, wisdom allows you to see situations with clarity, distinguishing between your boss's criticism, outside your control, and your response to it, within your control. Like 4 pillars supporting a temple of character, each virtue strengthens the others. Where wisdom illuminates the path, courage provides the strength to walk it. The second virtue, courage, extends far beyond physical bravery. The Stoics understood courage as the ability to act appropriately despite fear or discomfort. It's about doing what's right even when it's difficult, standing up for your principles even when it's unpopular, and persisting in the face of adversity. Epictetus summarized this virtue succinctly: persist and resist. Courage manifests in daily decisions, speaking an uncomfortable truth in a meeting, pursuing a meaningful goal despite potential failure, or walking away from a toxic situation when it would be easier to stay. Where courage provides the fortitude to act, temperance offers the wisdom of restraint. These virtues balance each other like opposing forces in perfect harmony. The third virtue, temperance, addresses a challenge that's perhaps more relevant today than ever before: finding balance in a world of excess. Temperance is the practice of moderation, self-discipline, and appropriate restraint. It's the golden mean between deficiency and excess, helping us set healthy limits in all areas of life. Seneca offered this insight about temperance. You ask what is the proper limit to a person's wealth. First, having what is essential, and second, having what is enough. This wisdom cuts through our culture's endless pursuit of more. In daily life, temperance might mean limiting screen time to maintain mental health, setting boundaries in relationships, or avoiding the extremes of overwork and idleness. Temperance governs our relationship with ourselves, while justice extends this governance to our relationships with others. They flow together like tributaries into a river of right action. The fourth virtue, justice, encompasses fairness, righteousness, and fulfilling our duties to the community. Marcus Aurelius considered it the most important virtue, calling it the source of all the other virtues. Justice recognizes our inherent interconnectedness. As Marcus observed, what's bad for the hive is bad for the bee, highlighting how our individual well-being is linked to the well-being of others. This virtue guides how we treat others and fulfill our social roles. Justice might lead you to speak up against unfair practices at work, volunteer in your community, or simply ensure you're treating everyone you encounter with dignity and respect. What makes this framework so powerful is how the virtues work together, reinforcing and balancing each other. Wisdom without courage remains theoretical. Courage without wisdom becomes recklessness. Temperance without justice can become self-centered. Justice without temperance risks burning out. Together, they create a comprehensive system for making decisions with both practical effectiveness and ethical integrity. Consider how this might work in practice. Imagine you're facing a difficult conversation with a colleague who consistently takes credit for your work. Wisdom helps you recognize what aspects are within your control. Courage gives you the strength to initiate the conversation despite potential conflict. Temperance guides you to address the issue calmly. Justice ensures you approach the conversation seeking a fair resolution rather than revenge. The four virtues provide a versatile framework that applies equally well to major life decisions and everyday challenges. Whether you're considering a career change, navigating relationship difficulties, or simply deciding how to respond to a minor annoyance, these virtues offer clear guidance for making choices that align with your highest values. The power of negative visualization. Now that we've explored how the Stoic virtues provide a framework for making decisions, let's turn to what might initially seem like their most paradoxical practice. What if deliberately imagining losing everything you value most could actually be the key to experiencing profound happiness? The ancient Stoics developed a psychological technique so powerful, yet seemingly backwards, that modern therapists are only now rediscovering its effectiveness. The practice of negative visualization, or what they called premeditatio malorum. In a world obsessed with positivity, manifestation, and optimistic thinking, this ancient practice feels almost heretical. We're constantly told to visualize success, imagine our best life, and focus exclusively on positive outcomes. Vision boards, affirmations, and manifestation journals have become the standard tools for personal development. Yet the Stoics suggested something that appears to be the complete opposite: regularly and intentionally imagining worst-case scenarios. The practice of negative visualization involves taking time to vividly imagine losing the people, possessions, relationships, and circumstances you value most. You might picture your partner leaving you, losing your job, your home burning down, or even contemplating your own mortality. The Stoics understood something profound about human psychology that science is now confirming. Picture an Olympic athlete standing at the starting line before the most important race of their life. In the months leading up to this moment, they've repeatedly visualized not just success, but also every possible challenge. A slow start, competitors surging ahead, hitting the wall of exhaustion mid-race. By mentally rehearsing these scenarios, they've prepared their mind to respond calmly and effectively when real challenges arise. Negative visualization works exactly the same way in everyday life. When you mentally rehearse challenging scenarios, your brain forms new neural pathways through neuroplasticity. Each time you imagine a difficult situation, you're creating a response plan in your mind. The more you practice this mental rehearsal, the more prepared your brain becomes for handling real crises. This preparation reduces the shock that typically accompanies unexpected difficulties, minimizes impulsive emotional reactions, and allows you to approach challenges with greater clarity. Mental performance coach Seth Hasselhun applies similar techniques when working with athletes and combat specialists. He teaches them to use mental cues to stay present and predict potential outcomes during high-pressure situations. Hasselhun emphasizes that even when visualizing failure, you must maintain control of the visualization process. After seeing yourself fail, you can use what he calls instant replay to visualize your desired response, building extraordinary resilience. Try this simple exercise right now. Take a deep breath and imagine your smartphone suddenly stops working completely. What important contacts would you lose access to? What essential functions would you miss? How would you adapt? Now, return to the present moment and notice the subtle appreciation you feel for this device you likely take for granted. This brief mental exercise demonstrates the immediate perspective shift that negative visualization creates. For a more structured practice, set aside 5 minutes to sit quietly and focus on one aspect of your life you value. Gently imagine this element being taken away. What would it feel like? How would your daily routine change? What would remain that still brings meaning? Approach this with curiosity rather than dread. After imagining the loss, bring your attention back to the present and notice the genuine gratitude that naturally arises. As you become comfortable with the practice, you can gradually extend to more significant scenarios. Consider the mortality of loved ones, health challenges, or financial setbacks. The goal isn't to dwell in these imagined losses, but to briefly visit them, acknowledge their possibility, and return to the present with renewed perspective. This practice transforms your relationship with everything you value. When you regularly imagine losing your partner, you become acutely aware of their presence. Small irritations fade when contrasted with their complete absence. The same applies to your health, home, career, and possessions. In relationships, take a moment to imagine a loved one no longer being in your life. What conversations would you wish you'd had? What experiences would you regret not sharing? Then, return to reality with the opportunity to act on these insights. This makes you more deeply engaged with the people you love. For career concerns, imagining losing your job or a major project failing reveals contingency plans you might otherwise never consider. With health, visualizing limitations often inspires greater commitment to exercise and nutrition. Even with possessions, imagining loss clarifies what genuinely adds value to your life, transforming your relationship with consumption. The paradox of negative visualization is that by imagining losing what you value, you become far more present to its existence right now. When you recognize that everything is temporary, you naturally shift from taking things for granted to treating them as precious gifts. This perspective shift generates authentic gratitude no amount of positive affirmations can match. This practice also builds emotional resilience. By regularly exposing yourself to imagined losses, you develop psychological antibodies, the emotional equivalent of immune system protection. When real challenges arise, you've already developed the mental muscles needed to respond with composure. Negative visualization doesn't negate the value of positive thinking. Instead, it creates a balanced approach to life that acknowledges inherent uncertainty. You can still set ambitious goals while simultaneously preparing for setbacks. This reveals your capacity for adaptation and builds confidence in your ability to navigate life's inevitable difficulties. Stoic journaling, processing emotions effectively. The capacity for adaptation the Stoics recognized extended beyond mental preparation to how we process our experiences after they occur. What if the difference between being consumed by emotional reactions and responding with wisdom isn't willpower, but simply how you structure your thoughts on paper? The journaling method Marcus Aurelius practiced each morning reveals a counterintuitive approach to emotional processing that challenges everything we think we know about venting our feelings. Most of us have tried journaling only to abandon it after a few days, or to use it merely as a catalogue of complaints that reinforces our negative emotions. Without structure, emotional processing on paper becomes a loop of rumination that deepens neural pathways of distress rather than creating new ones. The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, took a different approach. His personal journals, later compiled as meditations, served as a daily practice of emotional processing and mental clarity, a conversation with himself that followed a distinct pattern we can adapt for modern life. The Stoic journaling framework. The framework consists of 3 essential components that transform vague emotional reactions into clear, rational responses. 1. Objective description. Describe the triggering event with complete objectivity, stripped of all emotional language and interpretation. 2. Examine value judgments. Identify the interpretations your mind has automatically attached to the event. 3. Plan a virtuous response. Develop a response aligned with Stoic principles of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. This 3-part structure creates a crucial separation between what actually happened and how you feel about it. Most of us conflate these elements, thinking, my colleague disrespected me in the meeting, when the objective reality might simply be, my colleague interrupted me while I was speaking. This separation creates a psychological space where wisdom can emerge during emotionally charged situations. The framework and practice. Imagine receiving critical feedback on a project you poured your heart into. Your immediate reaction might include anger, shame, or defensiveness. In a traditional journal entry, you might write, "My boss completely tore apart my presentation today. She clearly doesn't appreciate how hard I worked on this, and she's probably trying to undermine me because she feels threatened by my ideas." Using the Stoic framework, your entry transforms. Objective description asterisk. During our meeting today, my boss pointed out 3 errors in my data analysis and suggested reorganizing the presentation structure. She requested changes by Friday. Value judgments asterisk. I interpret this feedback as a rejection of my abilities. I believe criticism means failure. I'm assuming her motives are negative rather than constructive. I'm linking my self-worth to external validation. Virtuous response asterisk. I will review the specific points objectively and determine which improvements will strengthen the work. I'll separate my personal identity from this project and view the feedback as an opportunity to develop expertise. I'll practice courage by discussing any points of disagreement calmly and demonstrate temperance by restraining defensive reactions. This approach transforms what could have been emotionally destructive into an opportunity for growth. By separating facts from interpretations, you gain control over your response rather than being controlled by your emotional reaction. Guiding prompts. For those new to this practice, specific prompts based on Marcus Aurelius' self-examination can guide your journaling. What irritated me today, and what underlying value judgment caused this irritation? How did I respond to challenges today, and what virtues could I have better embodied? What is the most charitable interpretation of others' actions that troubled me today? These prompts help identify cognitive distortions and emotional triggers that might otherwise remain invisible. You might discover you consistently interpret neutral comments as personal criticism, or habitually catastrophize minor setbacks. Regular Stoic journaling brings these patterns into conscious awareness. A relationship example. Consider a disagreement with your partner that left you feeling hurt. A Stoic journal entry might begin with objective description. We discussed holiday plans for 30 minutes. My partner stated they wanted to visit their family. When I expressed my preference to stay home, they sighed and left the room. Value judgments. I interpreted their sigh and exit as rejection of my needs. I'm assuming they value their family's wishes over mine. I believe their leaving means they don't respect me enough to continue the conversation. Virtuous response. I will practice wisdom by considering alternative explanations. Perhaps they needed space to process disappointment. I'll demonstrate courage by initiating a follow-up conversation focused on understanding rather than accusation. I'll show justice by acknowledging their desires are valid, even if they differ from mine. This approach works whether your initial emotional reaction was justified or not. Even when someone has genuinely wronged you, the framework helps you respond from virtue rather than reactive emotion. Neurological benefits. Psychological research supports this approach. By articulating thoughts in structured writing, you identify and challenge negative thought patterns, a core component of cognitive restructuring. This creates emotional space between stimulus and response, allowing for thoughtful choices rather than automatic reactions. With consistent practice, this method rewires neural pathways. What once triggered an immediate emotional cascade activates a different circuit, one that leads to reflection before reaction. Over time, you'll respond to difficult situations with greater clarity, even before writing about them. What's remarkable about Stoic journaling is how it transforms not just how you process past events, but how you experience future ones. As you become more aware of your automatic value judgments, you'll catch yourself making them in real time. That awareness creates a crucial pause between stimulus and response, a pause where you can choose wisdom over reactivity. Voluntary discomfort, building mental toughness. That space between stimulus and response grows stronger when we deliberately test its boundaries. What if, instead of waiting for hardship to find you, you intentionally invited discomfort into your life in small, controlled doses? Seneca, one of Stoicism's most influential figures, advocated for a practice that seems utterly backwards to our comfort-seeking culture, voluntarily making yourself uncomfortable as a form of mental training. Our modern world is designed around maximizing convenience and minimizing discomfort. We have food delivery apps, temperature-controlled environments, and endless entertainment at our fingertips. While these innovations have improved many aspects of life, they've also created an unexpected side effect: psychological fragility. When every minor inconvenience is engineered away, we lose the natural opportunities to build resilience that previous generations encountered daily. This is where the Stoic practice of voluntary discomfort enters, as deliberate training rather than unnecessary suffering. Like a blacksmith forging steel in fire, we strengthen our minds through controlled exposure to challenging conditions. In his letters, Seneca advocates for specific practices like wearing rough clothing, consuming minimal food, and enduring physical hardships as preparation for life's inevitable difficulties. What makes this approach powerful is how it transforms your relationship with difficulty. When you choose discomfort rather than having it thrust upon you, you reclaim agency. You're no longer at the mercy of circumstance, but actively participating in your own mental development. Seneca saw these practices as training exercises that help us recognize our capacity to cope with minimal resources, reducing our dependence on external comforts. The brilliance of this approach lies in its preventative nature. Most of us discover our breaking points during genuine crises: the job loss, the relationship breakdown, the health scare. Voluntary discomfort allows you to build mental fortitude before you actually need it, creating a psychological immune system that activates during real challenges. Modern science supports what Seneca intuited centuries ago through a biological phenomenon called hormesis. When organisms experience low doses of stressors, like brief cold exposure or intermittent fasting, their systems respond by becoming more resilient. This adaptive response functions as a stress vaccine, preparing you to handle larger challenges with greater ease. The practice operates on a spectrum, with options ranging from mild to challenging. For beginners, taking a cold shower might be an appropriate starting point, a momentary shock that awakens your system and requires genuine mental discipline to endure. As you progress, you might experiment with a 24-hour fast, a digital detox weekend, or sleeping on the floor occasionally. The specific practice matters less than your willingness to sit with the discomfort rather than immediately escaping it. Voluntary discomfort counteracts hedonic adaptation, our tendency to quickly adjust to pleasurable experiences, requiring ever-increasing stimulation to maintain satisfaction. We get the new phone, feel a brief spike of happiness, then return to baseline as the novelty wears off. By temporarily removing comforts you normally take for granted, you reset your happiness baseline and regain appreciation for what you already have. Consider the simple pleasure of a warm shower after you've experienced a cold one, or the satisfaction of a meal following a period of fasting. These ordinary experiences transform into sources of genuine gratitude when they're no longer constant and expected. The voluntary removal of comfort creates a contrast that highlights the abundance already present in your life, breaking the cycle of constantly seeking more. Beyond building resilience and gratitude, voluntary discomfort serves another crucial function: self-discovery. Each practice reveals something about your reactions, triggers, and coping mechanisms. You learn where your mind goes when facing physical discomfort, how quickly you seek distraction from boredom, or how attached you've become to certain conveniences. This self-knowledge becomes invaluable information that deepens your understanding of yourself. During a voluntary fast, you might notice the difference between actual hunger and habitual eating patterns. While sleeping on a harder surface, you might discover how much mental drama you create around minor physical discomforts. A digital detox might reveal the extent to which you use technology to avoid sitting with difficult emotions. Each practice becomes a mirror reflecting aspects of yourself that remain hidden during comfortable times. The transformation happens gradually but unmistakably. With consistent practice, what once seemed unbearable becomes manageable, and what seemed manageable becomes easy. Your comfort zone expands through deliberately engaging with challenges. This expansion directly translates to greater confidence and reduced fear when facing uncertainty in any area of life. The psychological benefits extend beyond individual resilience to how you interact with others. Seneca believed these practices fostered empathy by giving us direct experience with conditions others might face involuntarily. When you've voluntarily gone without certain comforts, you develop greater understanding for those who lack them through no choice of their own. The beauty of voluntary discomfort lies in its accessibility. Unlike many self-improvement approaches that require special equipment or significant time investments, these practices can be integrated into ordinary life. A cold shower takes no extra time in your morning routine. Eating a simple meal requires less preparation than more elaborate options. The barrier to entry is purely psychological, your willingness to embrace temporary discomfort for long-term gain. Consistency matters more than intensity. A daily mild discomfort builds more resilience than an occasional extreme challenge. Start small, perhaps with just 30 seconds of cold water at the end of your shower, and gradually, increases your capacity expands. The goal isn't to prove anything, but to steadily build your tolerance for discomfort in a sustainable way. This practice prepares you for the unpredictable nature of our increasingly volatile times. The specific challenges you'll face remain unknown, but your capacity to handle difficulty becomes your most reliable asset. Through voluntary discomfort, you develop what psychologists call all-purpose emotional fitness.